This is the Focus on Parliament show on Civic Space TV, brought to you by the Center for Constitutional Governance. I am Isaac Kwagala, your host. Is it still Liberation Day, or rather now it is Revulsion Day? 38 years ago, the National Resistance Army overran Kampala, Uganda's capital, and it established a new political order in the country. This order still holds today. Subsequently, that day has been celebrated annually as Liberation Day. On today's program, we discuss the continued relevance of this day in light of contemporary Uganda's politics. Much later on the show, we also discuss the recent ruling of the International Court of Justice in respect of the petition brought by South Africa against the State of Israel in relation to the Israel-Palestine conflict still raging on in the Middle East. Now, joining me to discuss today's topic is a distinguished panel of ladies and gentlemen. I have the pleasure to host you, and you're most welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Let me start with Julian Nyabuhara. Is that the correct pronunciation? Julian is the Executive Director for Uganda Women in Trade. Julian, you're most welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Say hello to the viewership.
Hello. Good morning, viewers, and I'm glad to be on the show. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian. Next is Mr. Mulindwa Moses. Mr. Mulindwa Moses is the Executive Director for CYE Believe Network. Moses, tell us more about that and introduce yourself to the viewership.
Hello, by the grace of God, I'm happy to be here. Good morning, everyone. And I'm a director, co-founder of CYE Believe. It's a youth-led organization that aims at creating climate-resilient societies and empowering young people. Just for the sake also to add on, I'm also head of Land Heroes in Africa at United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. It's a UN agency that aims at making our land better.
It's a pleasure to have you, Moses. Last but not least is Mr. Roy Rugumayo. Rugumayo is a visionary and the head of the New Board Vision, a youth-led initiative. Roy, you're most welcome to the show. Say hello to the viewership.
Okay, thank you so much, Comrade Isaac Kwagala, and the leadership of Civic Space TV for having me on this show. It's a pleasure being on the panel with distinguished colleagues, and I look forward to deliberations on the topics that you have introduced. Thank you.
You're most welcome, Roy. So let me start with you, Julian. In 1986, when the National Resistance Movement took over the reins of the Ugandan state power, it had as a self-stated goal the restoration of democracy, the rule of law, good governance, and the like. What would be your view in light of today's developments, of course respecting the topic being the marking of the Liberation Day?
Thank you. My view is 38 years are too many years for one government or for one party to be still leading the country. The party, I think parties can rule for as many years as they can. But then, should we call it the government? Should we call it the same leaders? I do not know how to term that. But anyway, let's go to the most important thing. What have we achieved in the 38 years? Unfortunately, we have a very big generation of people who do not know another government, who do not know another president. And that's a little bit confusing for us And for this generation that we think are going to be next leaders, what have they seen for them to be able to be better leaders and for them to be able to give a better perspective? So when we talk about the 28 years, let's also put it in the personal life. After 28 years, 38 years, what have you achieved as an individual? After 38 years, that's the time you should sit down and look at what you've done or what you've achieved and say, am I going to the right direction or I need to change something? So when we look at our government, we need to look at different things. For example, we need to look at the economy, we need to look at the infrastructure, we need to look at education, we need to look at health. We need to measure, after 35 years, what have we been able to achieve? I think one big achievement we've had as a country, our population growth has gone up there. But then as the population grows, are the other services, are the other facilities growing that are there, or that will be there to serve this population? Because we must measure our growth according to the population of the country. And then where we need to see our youth in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years, in the next 30 years. So when we look at, for example, the health, when we look at the economy of this country, there are so many things that I cannot even begin to put my hands on or my head on about how I think our economy has not done so well like it should have. Because we know, for example, things that brought people together. This is a third world country. So for a third world country to grow, you need to have systems where people work together for people to grow in big numbers. The economy grows by bringing these small earners together. That's how a third world country grows. When it's a first world country, then the dynamics change. Because one person could be as wealthy as one third, let's say like one person could be wealthy than Uganda or than Rwanda or than Congo. Now, when we are talking about a third world country, why are we even a third world country? Because our purchase power is very low, our population is very small, services are not available, infrastructure is very poor. So that's why we end up being called a third world country. So for us to be able to grow, we must use collective efforts to bring people, use the people to grow a country. So what has this country, why is it that we have failed to move as expected? For example, when you look at 38 years from the time we were liberated, we had things like cooperatives. Cooperatives were very powerful. They used to bring together people who were growing either crops or rearing cows or doing anything, but they would make sure that they work together in numbers. It's very sad and very unfortunate that the system, I'm not going to blame either government or what, but the system has intentionally made sure that these cooperatives break into small groups, or not even small groups to individuals, whereby you see, for example, like the recent outcry or the recent outburst about coffee. We were all born knowing that coffee was marketed, was produced, marketed under cooperatives. But it's unfortunate to see that at this time, where we've reached is that coffee now, the government is dealing with individuals. That's so unfortunate. And that's why we are having lots of money being swindled, lots of money just disappearing. And they would be beneficiaries of this, for example, these funds or the whole sector. It doesn't make sense anymore. And we all know that coffee is now selling either €1, a kilogram goes for €1. That is a crop where every one of us or the country should be focusing. But then when you realize what is going on, cooperatives of bananas, cooperatives of cotton, cooperatives of all these, even beans and whatever, they used to have their cooperatives that used to bring. Then when you look at the day we lost our commercial bank as farmers, and they made sure that as a country, as we speak today, the farmers that are comprised of the 70% of the economy do not have even one financial institution where they can all run to for financial support. When you go to education, I do not know. The schools have multiplied in numbers. The number of children has multiplied in numbers. The government universities have multiplied. No, the universities have multiplied even to about 34. 34 for an economy like Uganda, I think those are too many universities.
Julian, you make very interesting points on the economy and the broad subject of the provision of social services. But let me just pick your mind on the democratic front. Are you satisfied with the progress we've registered, given that one of the core objectives of the current government was to restore democratic governance and the rule of law, the promotion of human rights? What could be your evaluation of it?
My small evaluation on democracy is we've made some bit of substantial improvement as far as first of all having a constitution in place. That was very important. We had a constitution. We had the first SCA, I think in 1996. Is it? If I'm not wrong. Though that we had the first parliament, though that parliament was comprised mainly of people who had been in the bush. They were the majority, I think around 34. They were the ones who were in parliament, who first went to parliament. But then I think here you'll speak mainly on behalf of the women. Women democratically, I think this country has been not bad. It has been done well, excellently well, in promoting women in democracy. We've had so many women get involved in politics. But then how do we make sure when we say let a woman go to parliament on behalf of the women to represent women, and this woman goes to parliament for the next 5 terms of parliament, she has been a member of parliament since SC. It doesn't make meaning. It doesn't make sense to me. So if we are to say, let women, it's affirmative action, either woman has come in on an affirmative action, let her serve 2 terms and let another woman come in, such that because the women population is big and we are trying to make sure that we spread this, you know. But then let's look at the human rights. Human rights, we are not doing as we are supposed to be doing, because we've heard of people who have been abducted. We do not know where these people are. We've heard of people who are dying. We do not know where those people are. Who is killing them? Nobody's taking responsibility. We are not having fair elections where people are coming in and being voted fairly and knowing someone walking out of an election and saying, yes, I lost. There is a lot of vote rigging, and it is in the open, and people think it is okay. People even talk about it and praise it. And then there is also a very big issue of commercialization of politics in this country. Is it allowing people who are supposed to be leaders to be leaders? Is the system allowing people who are actually supposed to be leaders be leaders? If you look at our parliament today, the kind of parliament that we have and the kind of people who stand up to speak in parliament, you realize that I think we sent in, though not all of them, but there's people whom you look at and you say, is this one supposed to be in parliament? Really? So, I mean, this system of commercializing politics is bringing us the wrong leaders.
Are they supposed to be elsewhere?
No, I don't think, you see,
where else?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that where. Okay.
You feel disappointed in their delivery?
No.
as members of parliament?
There is one thing we must
They don't have
appreciate.
the capacity to be
We
there,
are meant to
mentally.
do different things.
Exactly.
There is someone who is meant to be a doctor, and there will be very good doctors in their room. There is someone meant to be a politician. There is someone meant to be a cultural leader. There is someone meant to be a teacher, and they are very good in that field. So with the politics in this country, because of the money, because of the commercializing this whole thing, everybody thinks they can be a politician. So long as I have raised around 200 million on my account, or 500 million, I don't know from where, without even knowing where that money comes from. They've worked in a certain organization. Somehow they've miraculously accumulated this money. They think they can go to parliament.
500 is no longer enough in Shema.
So, yes, so we are trying to say, are we having the right people in the right positions? I'll give you a small example.
As you conclude.
Yes, as I conclude, I want to give you a small example, like education. There is a crisis in the education sector. Government is churning out a lot of teachers using government funds. But then there is something that people are not talking about. And our leaders are not talking about it. Most of these leaders, of these teachers, as soon as they graduate, they have identified a greener pasture in Dubai or UAE. So most of these go as maids, but because they have a professional background of teaching, they are working as very good maids who can do early education for the children out there. So we are having a scenario where all teachers graduating are just moving out of the country, and someone is not talking about it. So now you wonder, so that's why you find that schools are having such a hard time to get teachers, professional teachers. So they are resorting to people who are not teachers. And when you're applying for a job in UAE and you have a professional, an educational background, you have higher chances of getting a very good job, either as a maid or a housekeeper, or attendance. You attend to children doing homeschooling, basic homeschooling. So we are trying to say, like you are saying, we are ending up having the wrong people teaching in schools because we are having this silent, how do they call it? The movement of human resource to the
brain drain.
To UAE. So like then it brings us back to, are we having the right parliamentarians in parliament? Are we having the right people in classes teaching? Are we having the right people in hospitals treating? Are we having the right people in construction, actually doing construction? Or we are having a group of people that are desperate to be there, otherwise they would be somewhere else.
Thank you, Julian, for your perspective. Moses, let me bring you in. On the steps of Parliament, while taking the oath of office in 1986, this same occasion, he made his inaugural address to the nation. The president then said that the fundamental challenge of Africa are leaders that overstay in power. But he also said that, the change that they had manifested in Uganda was not a mere change of guards, which he qualified it as a fundamental change. Yeah. What's your assessment of his government for the last 38 years?
Are we assessing NRM or NRA? Because no, that's also a question.
NRA is a military wing of the NRM. So for purposes of this discussion, there isn't any distinction. It's government. Yeah.
Yeah, because when we talk about the government, but who are truly running the government? Because the ideologies that you talked about are fundamental change. People staying in power. I remember in that very speech, I think he talked about having 10 years term, and it's been 38 years. So you look at it and you're like, are the ideologies of NRM the ones being put in the public sphere, or the ones running the country, or the ideologies of NRM? So that's why I asked, what are we assessing here? Because Okay, let's just say it's NRM, but I think it's NRA.
You tell us. Tell us your frank opinion.
The success
think?
of NRM, I think, should be judged on the economic development or other developments in different life disciplines. Economically, she talked about infrastructure, education, healthcare. When you look at them, I think I'm just going to start with education. The success of education should be judged with the end product of education, or what we perceive education is going to do with the minds of the young people. And there is immense brain drain. I think it's an issue that has been discussed in the parliament of recent. Mr. Honorable Joel Senyoni mentioned about it. There was a social media exhibition about it. Like, people finishing school, they are taken to different countries. But that's not because of poor education. I think it's because of poor strategies and that we have in the country. The laws that are governing us, the strategies that we have, because if we had better strategies and we provide jobs for our students, because people are graduating today. As of now, people are graduating. Next year, there will be people graduating. The other year will be people graduating. Look at what education system or the reforms that we have, whether they are providing people that are going to be innovative, create jobs, or all of them are waiting for the 680,000 jobs that the government does provide. And when you look at that only, it shows you that the government has so many questions to answer, because it has been in power for 38 years, but they only have 800,000 jobs. That shouldn't be the case. You're supposed to be, if Museveni today, as a politician, he's a phenomenal guy, because he has led us for 38 years. 40 in 2026, and most probably he's coming back. I don't know whether he's going to win or not, but that shows you that he's a great politician, leading a nation for 38 years. But as a political leader or a leader, there are so many questions to be asked and so many answers that we require from him. What has he done for the employment sector? He found some jobs that were there, about 100 and something. He has literally created like a few, actually not 100, about 200,000 that were being created by the government. So for 38 years, he has just managed to create a very insignificant number. And that's causing the rate of brain drain that they were talking about. So that means that the education system is not performing to the level that we actually need it to perform at. And that's all on the government. 38 years, you're supposed to be having one of the best schools, not just in Africa, but globally.
As a young leader yourself, are you satisfied with the political progression that we've registered over the last 38 years? Do you think we are headed in the right direction?
500 member of parliament? No. When you look at the people that are actually outspoken in the parliament, that are talking about the issues that are affecting people down, my people down in Shema, people in Wududa or somewhere else, the number is very insignificant, and the parliament is growing larger and larger by the day. That's all because of monetization of the politics in the country. She was talking about 500 million. When you get 500 million or 300 million, you're good to go for election. That's no longer enough in Shema. I ran for member of parliament in Shema in the previous elections.
How much did you use in your estimation?
I'm not going to talk about my financial right now, but
you failed to
considerably.
Yeah, but there was I think it's one of the highly monetized area, Shema. People use billions of money,
which you haven't garnered yet.
That's the point. When you don't have money, you're not going to win.
So when you garner it,
no, you can garner it, but then there are also different
players
that are going to be involved. Are you close to the State House? If you're not, are you close in the army? Where are you coming from? Also many questions that shouldn't be the mark of having people to go to parliament to decide on people's lives. People's ideologies and philosophies should be, or fighting, having that tenacity of sustainable policy should be like a mark to take people in the parliament. But all that goes to the education system. We haven't educated people enough to scrutinize that. And also the poverty. Because people are not voting because they don't know who could be their right leader. They are voting the people that they are putting in parliament because they gave them 2,000 shillings, 1,000 on the voting day. Okay, you'll be like, oh, at least someone gave me 1,000.
I've had my fair
That's
share.
how people have lost hope. At least someone gave me 1,000 that I don't think I'm going to get from the government. People don't even think that they get anything from the government. So the education, I'm not talking about formal education only, but also civic education is lacking. The infrastructure, for 38 years, the state of our roads is immensely poor. You can't tell me for about, I think I was having a study there saying that from 2010 to 2023, the government only worked on 1,000 kilometers. Yet they are securing loans every day that pass by to work on infrastructure. The political impunity is something that is disheartening in this country. Breaking down the local voter, the nations, they are in a dire state and they are wondering whether they will be having. That's why when someone just comes out and they're like, I'm going against Museveni, there are no political ideologies that they're suggesting, but the fact that they are saying, I just want to remove this person, the whole nation, or the majority of the nations, they're going to rally behind that person because they just need that change. She talked about some of the people not have seen like any other government. I'm one of them. I believe he's one of them. We haven't, yeah. So yeah, we haven't seen any other government. And everyone is just,
You're counting me as well?
Yeah.
You can't.
But same one in his.
That's how the nations, like people in the country, are dying for change. They no longer even consider what's government doing for them or what the political ideologies are, but they just need that change.
That's a very sorry state to be in. But thanks, Moses. Let me bring in.
And
Right.
for one more second, I think, before I finish, I have to talk about the dire state of our health system. For 38 years, we would expect the government to have had about at least 10 mulagos in the nation. But we are still benefiting from only one mulago that was left by colonialists. We need to do better. We can't be securing funds and then they die out of corruption. When Civic came, or when NRM came, they came with great ideologies and philosophies, but they all vanished into the air. Corruption has taken over, political impunity, monetization, ngamba nogo, what in okumanya, you're gone. So that's how we judge NRM. It would be, I think it would be NRM with its ideologies is a great party, but is it NRM that is running the country or NRA?
Which is better? Let's put the question partly to Roy. Perhaps he will have the answer. But Roy, the Liberation Day is a culmination of a 5-year protracted violent struggle. War. We had a significant number of the Ugandan population perish in that war, with the earnest hope that, you know, that would be the sacrifice or the price to secure a democratic Ugandan for everyone to enjoy. But today, as we speak, this government has arguably the worst human rights record in all our nation's history. And when you talk about democratic governance, we have a regime that, you know, has fundamentally altered the constitution to prolong its stay in power. First was the term limits, now is the age limit. There is not even a single, sign of either correction or relenting. What's your assessment of this government on the whole leading up to the 38-year period?
On a whole, would take us 500 years back. Because 38, even if you add the 5, doesn't give context of what we need to talk about. We need to understand the history of this area we call Uganda today. Okay? And its inhabitants, who were hugely gatherers, not even farmers, but people roaming around and gathering fruits and hunting. So then we have the violent moving of Bantu Nilotics coming in, okay, who violently get rid of the initial inhabitants, some of whom recede to the sides of Kasese, the Congo Basin, and a few areas. A few of them survive to date. Then the violent fights of these tribal groups, the Banyoro fighting the Baganda, Ankore, the fights for dominance around.
But is that a fair assessment? Because
yes,
that's even
yes,
pre-colonial.
Before
the formation of
it comes from a context. Let's discuss from that context as well. Then the colonial comes in with over a century of planned and whatever happens therein. Then we have the independence struggles. Then we have independence, or whatever we might call it then. Okay? And from the 1962 to the 1980s, a period of 20 years, we have over 8 heads of state, over 8 governments, we can say. So change of government or change of face of who is in charge is not actually the problem in Uganda. Because speaking of change, we've had quite a number of changes. Quite a number of changes. So what kind of state do we have at in 1980? Many of them, regionally and globally, are dismissing Uganda as a failed state. And those are facts. So the Amin regime, Tito Okello Lutwa, and the 1980 election and whatever happened therein, then a 5-year protracted war. You know, in war, there is always a tendency of the breakdown of fabrics that hold society together. Mostly embassies close, churches close, families disintegrate, people die. The only group that usually has some sense of power after a war is the armed group, usually. And it is the only group that could possibly hold itself accountable. because every other that could has disintegrated. So in 1986, these people walk into Kampala, go to Radio Uganda and announce that they are in charge. What's the state of the state at ground zero in 1986? Population, 10 million people. Unskilled, uneducated, hugely uneducated. Children dying in their thousands of preventable diseases like measles, kwashiorkor, marasmus. Is there an education to talk about? Is there a health structure to talk about? Is there an infrastructure to talk about? Is there a democracy even to talk about? But then, what is the urgent need? The avoidance of these avoidable deaths. The reason we are here critiquing and having these discussions is perhaps we didn't die in infancy because of polio. Why? Someone took a deliberate step to say, let's immunize children in their millions. And that was an urgent need.
That's a basic function of government, Roy.
No, I'm speaking of a government. I mean,
any responsible government. That's a basic
so
function.
by the time, so you are acknowledging that there is a government that took responsibility.
An international obligation.
It's an international obligation.
Which they took seriously and actually immunized people at grand scale. Even now,
as is expected.
Actually, as we speak, we could point at very many areas where people die of these preventable diseases, but not here. But then even before that, people have been running around because of war and insecurity. So the urgent need before we even speak of food and water and what is the stabilization of the country to have security. And has that been achieved? Perhaps many of us could have our reservations or even disagreement, but by far and large, we could agree that we have relative peace from border to border. It is then now that we can, after all these, now the issue of education comes out. Do we go massive or do we go small scale quality? Do we go quantity? And so the decision of universal education, let's have everyone go to school and obtain, even if the most basic of numeric or writing, reading, let them be able to say their name at least, or write down 5, or even count money. And that was a need, which I think by current statistics, the government did hugely and successfully. Okay, so I think we can critique, we can say right or wrong. Here they did well or here they did bad. But on the basics, we could agree that we speak of industrialization now. We speak of the youth being unemployed today because, first of all, they didn't die of polio and kwashiorkor, so they are alive. And they have obtained some level of education. Now they need jobs. That is a good thing. Now we can discuss their jobs since they have been educated and they are alive.
After a period of 38 years. That's when we should
No,
discuss
I
that
think-
question.
Now we can-
Let me understand, Moses, just
Yeah.
before.
He
I'm
wants
going to
us-
leave
he
him with a
wa-
question.
No, he wants
Then
us
you
to
can
plan
come in.
for
No, I mean, no,
You see, it's
so
rather
No, that's
it's rather cynically disturbing because
I
you
know.
seem
no,
to paint
I'm
the
still
impression-
going on. I'm still going
the-
on.
the-
Unless you,
let me
my
make-
time
perhaps
is up.
obtain. No, it's not up.
Okay.
Let me just
So-
obtain this clarification from
Yeah,
you.
sure.
You seem to paint the operation, having cited all those, numerous and very strong successes of the NRM government. But what disturbs me is that you seem to affront that as justification for some of the fundamental failures that persist up to now, despite the very, long stretch of time, or almost coming to 4 decades. For example, does that then justify the gross political and human rights situation that we have in the country? That simply there are those successes, therefore we should put up a blind and forget about the other aspects?
No. Of course, one of the reasons for perhaps even the liberation war happening in the first place was these gross human rights abuses that were there.
That was the
State-backed-
fundamental reason.
Yes, state-backed human rights violations. Okay? State-inspired violence. Okay? Now, what we have today that my colleagues here described as political turmoil, perhaps the monetization of politics, the police brutality, and all these. These are unwanted, unappreciated pockets that happen here and there, but are punishable by law. At least you have seen, not once, not twice, the perpetrators of these violations facing the law and facing the consequences of their actions. It is not the position of government to torture anyone. The known position of government, the position of government on human rights is clearly indicated in our laws, in our systems, and in the way of accepted operations of the security forces. Okay. Now, there are, of course, these people who do these acts come from society. Of course, these elements are not, we cannot assume they were recruited from elsewhere. Okay, so as we together work towards holding each other personally and collectively to a higher standard, we must put a stern rejection to such elements, both within our security forces and within our societies. I don't think it is the security forces that are in our homes beating our wives. It is ourselves. But those are the same people the security forces are going to recruit from to put onto the streets. So there is a huge need in that angle. But the position of government is very clear on what is acceptable standards. There is a security standard, a police standards unit in the police, in the military police, that people who are culpable of doing these things are tried. You have seen some of them tried in open courts in northern Uganda and even facing the firing squad there. So it is not acceptable standard. But also regarding the NRM's view of democracy is that it should be broad-based. This is the only democracy where you have women members of parliament as a matter of law. we have youth members of parliament, we have the disabled, we have the elderly, we have the workers. It's as broad-based a democracy. We have youth representatives from the village level, parish, sub-county. All these are avenues to have the voices of the people brought to the forefront, as it was in the beginning of the coming of the NRA, you know, of the village resistance committees, even during the Bush War, that the democracy must be a product of the very working of the masses themselves.
What does that have to do with the quality of the elections? Because that's the most authoritative indication for a good, thriving democracy.
Now, as I said, we must definitely hold ourselves to all of us, because I know very many people who are apparently within the forces of change who bribe voters. To them, the end justifies the means. That is not acceptable, okay, to any of us, no matter which side of the aisle you are on. But people do it for their own personal or even selfish interests. So it is our duty, regardless of where we fall, whether we are NRM or opposition or civil society, it is our collective duty that we must hold ourselves first and hold our people to a higher standard of what is acceptable to all of us. That's only when we can build a better country. We cannot simply point fingers and say, this is the role of civil society. They're the ones who should be doing this. Or this was supposed to be the role of our education. What about those who have not had the privilege of going to school and yet they are voters? What, aren't they supposed to be civically competent? So it's a responsibility of all of us, and I don't think we should throw it at anyone.
Fundamentally, it's the responsibility of government. But Moses, you seem to have a comment on Roy's submission.
Roy and I have a disagreement. And it's a fundamental one thing. We are not criticizing NRM on the basis of basic roles any government has to do. You're talking about mass immunization, broad education. Those are basic roles that any government must do, whether it's NRM, whether it was Obote. I think they did their best with the financial capabilities they had at that particular moment. Because when we talk about mass immunization, it's not like NRM did Thomas Sankara move of like, we are going to get money within the country, we are going to build that financial mechanism where we are going to get our own money, buy these immunization drugs, and do that. This is borrowed money, and they have to account for it. They borrow money to come and make our infrastructures better, but then that money is not used to their full capabilities. Our questions are, where is that money? That's where we disagree from, because when you talk about, yeah, they have built schools or they have broadened the education, well, that can be done by any person in the government. We have three arms of the government. We have the judiciary, we have the parliament, and the executive. But it seems like it's only the executive that is running the nation. When he said that you can't point arms anywhere, if you have ministries that are not functioning, there have to be questions. And whom are you going to ask? The head of the state. Because the bodies, at least we can all agree that the people that are in parliament, not all of them are functional. Some are just their bodies to make the numbers. He talked about having a broad, decentralized democracy. Is it for the people or a campaigning tool? Because those are the questions that we're supposed to be asking ourselves right now and scrutinize them critically. We talked about, we saw it in elections during COVID. President Museveni didn't need to go down on the grounds or anything and do campaigns because he already had the strategy there. Peoples were there. He had the LC chairpersons, the youth, this, that. You have 500 members of parliament and everything. They're campaigning for you. You have the financial push to give them and do that for you. So the question is, are we having that as a mechanism to make people's lives better or to make NRM stay in power for longer? And if they're staying in power for longer, which is not a problem because that's okay. You can have a party run the nation as long as they want, as long as they can.
As long as the people.
As long as they can, if the people want them to do that. Yeah, that's democracy. One thing that everyone can actually thank Museveni, at least we get to have 5 years of, an event and we do that and move on. But then NRM can do that for a century, more than a century, that's okay. But what we are asking for is the service provision of what NRM is doing and what it ought to do. If we are talking about education, we can't be having a second industrial revolution education in 2024 when countries are moving to the fifth industrial revolution education. That's a lie. For 38 years, you can't tell me that you haven't attained any financial muscle to make sure that the health system is better. We only have Mulago. The others are referral hospitals. It's just of recent that our airport has been improved. I was in I think it was the UK. One Ugandan actually told me we actually have a kitchen as an airport. When you're traveling all these airports and seeing all this infrastructure and everything, it makes you appreciate other people's governments. I'm not saying this because I hate the government. No, I like NRM. One of the things that I talked about is that their ideologies are great. If they're implemented, would be better. I think it was Albert Einstein who said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Look at the economy. We are talking about parish model now, but that was Emyoga back then. So we are literally doing the same thing without even improving it.
Moses, let me bring in Julian. Thanks for your perspective. Julian, does the question of NRM's longevity, does it worry you? And do you think, because he makes such an interesting observation, referencing the quote of the famous scientist Einstein, is it possible that a government can stay this long in power and achieve so little, and then we have high expectation going forward that something could positively, fundamentally change?
I would want to start from a view that what's a government? Or we could have a party lead for over even 100 years. We've had those parties that have led for over years and centuries, especially in countries like India. At least all of you, as young as you are, ANC has been in power for as long, Except that with South African ANC is that it has had several faces of leaders, several presidents. So for a party, I think a party can still lead as many years as possible, so long as it's still delivering what people want. But then here, if we are talking about a government, are we talking, what's government? Is it the individual who is leading, or it's the system that he has put in place? So, but for me, I think it is about changing faces is good. It's very good. And that's why it has been put almost in every world constitution, in every constitution all over the world. Why? because we cannot be the same. We cannot lead the same. We cannot act the same. We cannot do things the same. I think that was the whole essence of trying to change leaders in governments. Because people think if you could serve for 5 years, or if you could serve for 10 years or 20 years, then there could be someone probably who will bring things and do them better, or do them, you know, they could come and be worse. They could come and do the worst of it. But then people need to appreciate that there is a reason why we should change governments. And there is a reason why whoever started politics or leadership knows why we should change leaders. Even traditional leaders, there is a time they reach and die. Then we change. Naturally, there is a change of leadership. So what we are trying to say is that, yes, in this era, we appreciate change of leadership. I'm not saying anybody should be changed, but I'm saying leadership should be changed. And
we live in a democracy. You can as well say it.
Yes.
Should they be changed after all?
That's supposed to be a government role.
I do not want I do not want someone who is probably heading URA or someone heading a certain authority to think that this lady is saying all of us should go. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying yes. Change of leadership is very good for change of systems, for change of ideas, for change of ideologies, for change of how things are done, because things are evolving every day. Ideas are evolving every day. The way things were done 20 years ago is not the way things are done now. Things are changing tremendously. So probably if we had a change of leadership in all institutions, by the way, right from LC, right from even maybe what we cannot say we change is our families, leadership in families, because a father stays a father, a mother stays a mother. Those are biological responsibilities. But then outside there, when you're leading more than a home, where you're leading your biological children or you're leading your biological relatives, then there we need, because you're leading different people with different perspectives. So we are saying, let's not cripple the system. Let's not cripple the system. How do you cripple the system? You cripple the system by doing the same things, expecting, like he said,
different results.
Expecting different results. We need to get to a point whereby we get out there and say, no, we need things done differently. If we are talking about us expecting change, like someone said here, that some of these people have not seen any other leaders, they've not seen any other governments. It's not for the sake of it that we must change government, no. But we are saying, I think why everybody is, especially the youth, why they jump on the opportunity of another leader, of a change of another leader, is that they want to see, can we see how this one does it different? Probably some even are even thinking that, can we even see how someone else will be a president? Like how someone else will stand up there on the platform and speak as a president. Like there are small things that people want. And people have a lot of hope and have a lot of expectations in those small changes. So we are trying to see that we have been stuck for 38 years with the same people, same systems, same way of doing things, same way of reasoning things, same way of executing things, and we are expecting things to change. No, they will not change. So what we are saying is, let's do things differently. Let's do things. We are appreciating that this government has done so much, especially when it comes to security. Yeah. When it comes to security, when it comes to things like education, there has been really an upraise on how many children have been able to go to school, how many girls have been able to go to school, how many women have been able to go to school, though and we cannot expect 100%, because even the US, there is a high level of people not going to school, of children, illiteracy. Of youth, illiteracy. It's because people think speaking English is going to school. No. Not everybody who speaks English has gone to school. They can't even read. We have people in the US who are very excellent in English, but can't even read a book. They can't. Why? Because education is different from either speaking English or being able to stand there and express yourself. So what we are trying to say, we appreciate what this government has done, but how do we expect things to be done in a better way? Do we expect it? Do we expect that by changing, maintaining the same systems, maintaining the same people, maintaining the same structures? Or how do we ensure that? One question I would like to put to you, the young ones, is how shall we change things and change how things are done with the same people? Do you expect that to be done?
With that question, Focus on Parliament takes a break. We'll see after the break.
National Water and Sewage Corporation is committed to providing cost-effective, clean, safe and reliable quality water and sewage solutions in urban centers across Uganda. National Water and Sewage Corporation reaffirms its commitment to 100% service coverage, geographical expansion, infrastructure development, water quality, pro-poor initiatives, customer care and stakeholder engagement, catchment and water source protection. Be a water hero. Pay your bills to zero balance. Report all leaks, busts, and illegal water connections to enable us serve you better. Reach us through our toll-free numbers on 0800 200 977 or 0800 300 977. You can also communicate with us through any of our online platforms or visit the National Water and Sewage Corporation office nearest to you. This message is brought to you by National Water and Sewage Corporation.
Welcome back. This is the Focus on Parliament show on Civic Space TV. In this segment, we conclude the discussion on the Liberation Day celebrations, but also we substantially discuss the question of the Israel-Palestine conflict raging on in the Middle East. Roy, Julian left it at the point where she posed a very reflective question, I believe. She said, especially for us, the young people, we should begin to consider how to entrench change of systems across the board. What's your view? Do you think it is still feasible that this government can still deliver on its core promises, given the longevity it has been in power? Should there be still that expectation on the part of the citizens?
Usually on defining ourselves or accepting the definition of young people or youth, we choose to do it mostly biologically and not ideologically, because those are different constructs. You could be young biologically, but very sound ideologically. And that so much characterized the generation of the Mzee Museveni, Mzee Rwigema, Ivan Koreta, the group that was hugely in their 20s in going to the bush war to fight against the sitting government. And their issues stated in the 10-point program were hugely ideological, even when biologically they were just children. So the question before us is one of what, rather not who. What are the fundamental issues that should be addressed?
So it doesn't matter who addresses them? It doesn't?
No, it doesn't.
If we get a person that does not meet, for example, the criterion of a good leader, it doesn't? We can
the criterion of a good leader is on the ability to fulfill the what. The what entirely determines who. When we begin with the question of who, we lose focus of what. Then we begin running around with, oh, we need change. We need to get rid of this one. Let's first have a new one then we shall discuss what. But rather, that is putting the cart before the horse. What are the fundamental issues that we face as a country? Is it unemployment? What could solve the unemployment? Is it commercial agriculture? Is it massive industrialization? Is it the service sector? Who then has a clearer vision on solving that issue? What is the issue? Is it security? The ability to move your goods and services without any fear of being attacked on the way, being hijacked by roadblocks and killed and your goods stolen, being able to move from here and invest anywhere because the country is secure from border to border. That is an important what? And it determines who. Is it about the market, the sufficiency of our market to be able to consume all our goods? Or is the market insufficient and therefore we must look outside to the East African integration, to the African integration, and to the bigger positioning of Uganda and Africa as a global producer? That is an important what, and it therefore determines the who. And the NRM has been very clear on those constructs, on what determines, on what are the pillars and the issues I have mentioned of patriotism, Pan-Africanism, socio-economic transformation, and democracy. Those important whats have hugely, from 1986, determined the who. So, as young people, we need to be alive to the interests of our country. And I think many of us have been. We have understood that we can only be as peaceful and as prosperous to the extent that the DRC is. And our actions in the DRC have been clear. We can only be as prosperous and as stable as Somalia can be. And you have seen the actions of the NRM in that area. We can only be as prosperous if we can add our market to that of Tanzania and of Kenya and of Congo and of Somalia, and as wide and as deeply cohesive we can be. And you have seen the direction the NRM has taken in that line. So these other issues that are supportive of those major functions, because as we speak of goods, the manufacture of goods, we need electricity. And you've seen to what extent the NRM has invested in the manufacture of electricity. For us to move those goods from the farms to the markets, we need roads. And you've seen to what extent the roads leading to and from the markets have been constructed. For us to move those goods to even better markets beyond the borders, we need the airports, we need the railway, and strategically, you've seen the NRM move towards that direction. We have functional airports across. We can discuss their quality. We can discuss their beauty in comparison to other airports we have seen elsewhere. But what is the issue of concern? Is it quantity or quality?
Let me understand.
And in the law of the dialectics, quantity can easily be transformed into quality. The question of what has been determined by the Ugandans and the historical injustices they have faced. I think when you read the preamble of the Constitution, they pour out their hearts regarding what kind of turmoil they have gone through. So a government that comes in and clearly states what are the strategic bottlenecks that must be addressed for us to obtain socio-economic transformation. Because that is like the end goal for us, that our society must metamorphose to a better society, both socially in these social interactions, politically, economically, and all that. So the NRM puts down what we think are the issues. And these issues have been presented to the Ugandans every after 5 years, that this is what we think the issues are. And the Ugandans have overwhelmingly accepted the NRM's understanding of those issues. And it has made it easy for the Ugandans to easily settle for the who.
For this.
After clearly defining what the issues are, and those definitions resonate with what the challenges our people are facing. So now, when issues of electricity have been solved, and issues of roads have been solved, the issues of mobility have hugely been solved. So what we are heading to is a clear takeoff. A clear takeoff. Because these strategic bottlenecks have hugely been addressed. People were immunized so they didn't die of kwashiorkor and marasmus. Good. People have been hugely educated. Now we can discuss the quality of education and head into how do we improve that quality, because quantity have been achieved. How do we improve that quality? Good. Where do we employ them then? Industries, and they are coming in droves hugely, because electricity is there, security is there, water is there, piped everywhere. So roads are there, they can easily move in and out. So when all these issues have been resolved, we are simply going onto a takeoff stage to head into the promised land that is real social and economic transformation.
Which we haven't achieved in 38 years. So it's after 38 years that we are going to do the takeoff.
No, the thing is context. The 38 years we are not, Uganda was not at the situation of 10 years back, 38 years ago. The context was that I gave you, at least, is one of a country that had been written off by everyone as a failed state. And that's a fact that we can all agree on. So from a failed state to one that is on takeoff to socio-economic transformation, that is a great journey.
Isn't it high time we got a new captain to shepherd us into that new stage, the takeoff stage?
I think you've either not been listening or you are deliberately.
No, I am saying because you seem to say
No, what I'm saying
that
is
at
that-
the onset of the
Yes.
the NRM,
Yes.
essentially it was redemption from an abyss. So
Now
it's
we have
38
been
years,
redeemed.
and we are ready to now
We are from
catapult
the negatives.
from the negative.
Yes.
So we are not yet into the positives. We are just at the baseline now.
Not really.
Because the question
There are
is,
things we can point at. And
if we
say,
are preparing,
we are
preparing for the takeoff stage, is it not high time we got a new captain to now take us into that?
Now
because
that
now
is
the stage of redemption is way
now
behind us.
that is a decision that the four of us can't make. Of course, just like my colleague said, in 2026, that decision will be placed before 50 million Ugandans to decide what happens next. But the question has never been of who, but what. And when the what is presented to them, I think they will easily point at the who.
Moses, I know you seem to be itching to just a comment.
Yeah.
In rejoinder, but you just, for now, shelve it. I pose the question, then you'll answer.
All right.
So now turning to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Recently, the ICJ came out strongly to condemn Israel over its, gross human rights record in Palestine, and it had a number of orders that it also, directed the state of Israel to comply with, among which is the need to preserve evidence of any genocide-related activities and the allowance of the access and the smooth flow of humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. What have you been able to make out of this conflict? Because there are people like the Justice Sebutinde who view this conflict as purely a political question. In her findings, she details the reasons, but to summarize it, she says it is not something that you can settle using the law. They need to have a politically negotiated settlement out of it. What's your take?
Yeah, I'm going to have a take on that in just a minute. I have to first address the who and the what, because I feel like coming 2026, because it's near, it's imperative to talk about those two. It's not just any who that gets into power that will be a success. So the who that Roy says is not that important is actually very vital, because
I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying it must be determined by the what.
Yeah, you actually said the what is the most vital one. The who anyone can take on the role, which is a very bad take, I think, from my perspective, because this is 2024, 21st century. There is a lot of indoctrination, a lot of manipulation that is happening using social media, imperialist spewing money here and there and everything. So basically they can easily groom someone with their agendas and ideologies. Despite the fact that the what is there, streamlined and stated by the state or by any agency, any government agency, be the army, maybe the parliament or the judiciary, just like the constitution states, and but getting someone in the executive, because this is someone that is going to be executing with the highest power. So if that person that is there doesn't prioritize the what, because you can have the what, but if it's not prioritized by the person that has been put in power, then the what is useless. You're supposed to put someone, the who is supposed to be to the speed and having the passion and the tenacity and actually prioritizing, having the philosophical ideologies of taking on the what. So the who is important. Coming 2026, I think one of the things, the challenges that we are having in our country is that the opposition is now tapping into the naivety of the young people, confusing them that the who is not that important as long as the structures are functioning. So you can put anyone into the power and everything is going to be delivered, which is not the case because we've seen it in different countries and different areas. So the who is very important. I don't know who the who will be or who he is, but then that's
Or
vital.
she.
Or she. I'm sorry. Yeah, or she. Yeah, but that's important. Now, talking about the Palestine-Israel war, I think the Middle East is currently like a geopolitical hot seat. Everyone wants to tap on it. There is oil. People are scared. Maybe there could be weapons of mass destruction, which is always a lie. As I was talking about neocolonialism and imperialism, the agendas that are being put in people's minds, and we can easily accept them because once you see something over and over, you're like, maybe that's the truth. Maybe that's a fact. This war didn't start on 7th October, as many people allude to. It started way back, I think in 1948. The conflict between Israel and Palestine, and they have been going on for decades. But then the world has been quiet on it until of recent, and South Africa was like, we went through the same thing scenario, so we must help our brothers and sisters to make sure that they attain the justice that they have longed for decades. And seeing the ICJ judgment, I think it gives that tablespoon, the teaspoon of hope to the civilians of Gaza that finally, maybe we are going to be protected. We are going to get a protection from the humanitarian destruction that we've been getting, mass murdering of our children, women, and men, everyone in Gaza, destruction of property and everything. So it's hope. It's a significant milestone towards justice to the people that have longed for it for decades. So I think that's a start. Justice Septindi saying that it's a political issue. Yes, it is, because any issue that is put on an international scale, it's politicized. But then we are not supposed to lose our humanity because something is political. There has to be a fundamental and a basis for people to start taking action. And having ICJ's ruling is a basis for actually nations now to start taking action. Because one of the things that they talked about is alluding that actually accepting that there are genocidal acts carried on by Israel in Palestine. Now, countries, it's a global village. Now, countries that have the economic capabilities, military capabilities, can actually now pose sanctions to Israel. So, however much it's a political issue, I think the ruling was a basis for other countries to engage in, basing on something, because this is the International Court of Justice that say these are genocidal acts. You're violating Genocide Convention Act. So if you're violating that, maybe other countries, powerful countries, can now impose sanctions on Israel basing on that ruling, which can help the people of Gaza or tone down Israel with their acts, allow the easy flow of humanitarian aid, maybe documentation of these genocidal acts, make sure that there is punishment for those that carry genocidal acts. So I think the ruling was I'm just looking for a political correct word. I don't want to mess up here. Yeah,
you don't have to be correct.
Yeah, it was a great thing. And Justice Septindi, I think some of the things I read through her ruling and things that she said about them, I think it's just justifying her actions. But when you get onto that stage, you're not just serving yourself, having your own opinion. Because now to the world, it was perceived that this is a Ugandan ideology. This is all Ugandans think, and not just Uganda, maybe East Africa and South Africa. Maybe we just let down the entire continent, because now people feel like South Africa is just reporting that because they went through the same scenario. But that's not what Africans think about it, because she's the only African there. So when you get into positions like that, you have a bigger responsibility. With bigger powers, there must come a bigger responsibility. So I think she had to consider so many issues without nullifying every ruling that the ICJ.
Are you saying she was supposed to have a certain inclination on account of the merits of the case, or simply because there was an expectation from the...
A political expectation.
Okay. A political expectation from the public, the global population.
Moral.
That could seem like that, but there are facts that are seen by everyone. You having your own political ideology or idea or a political philosophy shouldn't intervene in your judgment of the facts and the truth. And the fact is that people in Gaza have been put under insurgency. They are having genocidal acts happening in Gaza. I think in just 3 months, more than 1% of the population has been killed. That's about 27,000 people in just 3 months. And this didn't start on 8th October. The killing of Gazians, it has been on. It's a recurring thing since 1948. You having political affiliations with different ruling bodies shouldn't stop you from having a judgment that is based on the facts, on the merits of the issue.
Julian, what's your view of this conflict? Is it a matter that can be settled by the law, or it's beyond the law? We should pursue the approach recommended by the Honorable Justice Sebutinde, that this is a fundamentally political issue which should be resolved through a direct political negotiated settlement.
We've had so many wars before. This is not the first war, and we've had so many conflicts before. And bodies like the UN have always come in to sort out some of these issues. But then some have been successful, some have not been. So I think to some extent, I agree with her reasoning, because if some of these conflicts have been solved that way, why can't this one, particular one, be resolved that way? Because to me, I think she was thinking that if you look at the support that the US is giving to Israel, and the US being the biggest, the most powerful,
global player.
Yeah. Global player. So I think she's, in her thinking, I'm trying to think with her. I've been trying to think with her, but I think in her thinking, she thought that being supported by the biggest world player, it would be hard for them to stop what they have started. Because we've seen the US, the way it does these things, when it's fighting such wars, when it's supporting, you've seen what it has done to Libya. Libya is almost now non-existent. It's a failed state. If you see what it has done to Syria, Afghanistan, I think we need to look back. So in her thinking, I think she thinks that if we rely on these countries sitting on the table together and talking, it is not going to happen. So she's thinking that let the other bigger players, like the United Nations, come in and have this issue sorted. So I wonder why people are not looking at it the same way. But when we go back to the actual war, of course, it's very absurd as a woman. It's a very absurd state of the situation. You do not actually want, I stopped looking at those, at that, watching that. I do not want to watch them. Because you see young babies being killed deliberately. Young mothers being killed. I mean, you cannot attack a hospital. A hospital is where everybody goes. Every vulnerable person, a sick person, mothers, women, children. I mean, people who are here to save lives, that's their calling. They are not there because they want to be. It's their calling. I mean, they are there because they have to be, to save lives. And then you come and bombard this hospital, not one, not two, not three. Then killing of journalists who are giving out information. I think this is a very absurd situation. Of course, I agree with the ruling, and I also want to respect Justice Julie's decision. She had her reasoning. If you look at it, she also, and we could not expect the whole bench to agree. What if someone else, okay, what if someone else disagreed? What would be the world? And I do not want us to look at it to color this decision. It's unfortunate that we are coloring it now. It's becoming Ugandan, it's becoming African, it's becoming black. That's a very unfortunate state. Because this is war. A war doesn't, nobody wants to be killed. No one wants children to be killed. Nobody wants humanity to be wiped out. It's like Israel's role is to make sure that the Gaza is wiped out of history. These are human beings, for goodness sake. These are human beings. Can someone call to order the Hamas and have, let's say, have a conversation? Ask what is it that is in there? And especially when it comes to protecting and preserving lives of the most vulnerable. People who are not interested in fighting, people who are most vulnerable, pregnant women. I do not know how many pregnant women have died in this struggle, that have died in this war. So on a humanitarian ground, I think on a global scale, we should all raise up against this war. I do not know. I'm very glad and very proud that South Africa at least took a step when other countries were silent. And I think that's a very huge challenge to the other nations, that at least either 275 lawyers took a step and said we are calling on an international issue. But then, is it going to be helpful? That's also another question that we are going to ask. Is this judgment going to create any impact?
Enforceable.
Is it enforceable?
Because yesterday I read that Israel has agreed on the ceasefire.
Okay, then that is very beautiful. Because for us, what we are looking at, yes, something they could have sat in Netherlands and as judges and agreed on something, but is it enforceable? Are we going to see a change after this judgment, after a week, after 1 month? Are we going to see a change because of this judgment? Then history will be made. Then we shall pat ourselves at the back and say yes. If it is coloring this, then we shall say yes, our Africans, we shall be in the books of history that Africans did something, South Africans did something, blacks did something, which probably most people would not have thought that this could happen. But for us, ultimately, I'm sure everybody, wherever they are, we want a stop to this. We want a stop to this. We want a respect of humanity. We want people to be alive. We do not want people to perish. We do not want a state to just disappear in thin air just because of either personal interest. There is no human being that deserves to live better than the other. We all deserve to live. Whether you are an Israelite, whether you are a Palestine, like he has said, yes, this war has been there for as long as we have understood to watch television or to read. We know this war has been there. Every day, someone is reported killed in Gaza, someone is reported killed in Israel, someone has thrown a bomb somewhere on a bus. This has been there over time. But then the magnitude now of having to kill over 26, I mean, they have almost 1% of the population, that's huge. That's huge. And these are countries these are states that are not that populated. So when they say they've killed, and every human being deserves to live. So let's go on and ensure that we support this judgment, and we ensure that we all come out with whichever platform that you can. Whichever platform that you can. You never know what you write on Twitter, what you write on Facebook, or what you write. Let's use social media, keep, there are people who have, particularly in Palestine, in the US, who have particularly made it their job to post something about this war. They post videos, you follow them, and you as an individual, you're forced to think that, I think this is too much, this must stop. So we need everybody to come out there, talk, speak, and in whichever platform you're in, you never know who reads, you never know who listens, you never know who will act. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Julian voices a strong call for peace and solidarity for the Palestinian cause. But, Roy.
For the humanitarian cause.
Humanitarian?
Yes, not Palestinian. Not Palestinian. We must be very critical.
Humanitarian.
Yes.
Okay. Roy, briefly, the state of Israel has made a strong argument that it takes strong exception to the petition lodged by South Africa at the ICJ, reasoning that this attack was against its citizens and the territory, and it was unprovoked. Therefore, out of self-defense, it did whatever was necessary in its capacity to defend its territory and the population. What's your view of this conflict, especially in light of the judgment, with the intricacies involved around enforceability? Do you see an end to this saga?
I think in this whole fiasco, whether we want to take it to have started on 7 or in 1948 or 2,000 years ago, whatever it is, all of us, at least on this panel, have at least a place of convergence that the madness needs to stop. Whether it is being orchestrated by the Palestinian state or the Hamas and affiliated groups, or by the state of Israel, for whatever justification they have to raise for their actions. This violence, at least when it began on 7th October, this current height of violence, one of the global leaders who came out unequivocally not to stand with Israel's right to self-defense or with Palestine's right to historical land and all that, but for the position of humanity, that there needs to be a solution for where no one has to lose their life. That was President Museveni. That was his position. That has been his position right from the beginning. That has been Uganda's position in the voting patterns at the UN, in our statements at the G77, in our statements at NRM, everywhere. Our position is we are neither for Israel nor for Palestine, but for a humanitarian end of this crisis where people have to live harmoniously and no one has to die for any interest of any state. So regarding particularly the judgment, those judges at the ICJ are not ambassadors of their countries. They are judges who go through systems of the UN to be voted for and approved by the Security Council and other agencies of the UN. So the position of the Honorable Judge Julia Sebutinde, we respect it, and it is an informed decision made from her analysis of the evidence and facts presented before her, which is expected of every judge. You look at the evidence and make your own analysis and make a ruling. However, clearly and unequivocally, that is not the position of Uganda. In fact, suffice to mention, Justice Sebutinde voted against Uganda in the DRC Congo case before the same court. So we cannot now in this case say she voted for the position of Uganda or for the position of East Africa or for the position of Africa. The position of these three entities, if there is any, is that there should be an end to the massacre that is happening. What she mentions that I would take credence for is that the cease of this crisis must come from all parties involved. She also mentions that we need to also talk to the Hamas in a similar way we are talking to the Israelis to release the political prisoners. Is it political prisoners?
Hostages.
Hostages. Yes, to release the hostages. And that is one thing we need to, because the petitioners didn't mention at all, yet it is a fact that some prisoners from Israel are being held. So they should be released and Israel should do the same. Humanitarian aid should be accepted by both parties. There should be an end to the blockade on Gaza. Told they have no access to electricity, to water, the biggest open-air prison in the whole world. That is unacceptable. No person should go through that. And as a country, we are under obligation, constitutionally at least, to stand in solidarity with any people in the world that are facing the kind of treatment that the people of Gaza are facing. This indeed needs to stop.
Your parting shot on this show.
My parting shot is that as a country and as all of us, the 49 million Ugandans, should hold ourselves individually and collectively to a higher standard for in the way we do things at our homes, in our schools, in our communities. Only then shall we be able to take our country forward, to take our society forward for the benefit of ourselves, our children, and posterity as a whole. So let's not point fingers of who should be doing what better, but all of us ought to come together and make our meaningful contribution to the better of our country and our continent.
Thank you, Roy. Rugumayo. Moses, your closing remarks.
Okay. Because I think no one on planet Earth is not respecting justice so much as judgment or ruling. 17 days ruling. The issue is that even where Israel supported the other judgment, 17 they didn't. And that was on the issue of humanitarian aid. Having an opinion that the issue should be resolved politically doesn't call for you to refuse a smooth
movement.
of humanitarian aid. That's where people differ from her. And I think with a little bit of history that has been going on back and forth, having Palestine put under occupation, for the lack of a better word, for decades. It's just having like, let's just have this imagination of like Kenya is Israel and Uganda is Palestine, and Kenya controls water, electricity, food that comes into your country, everything it does control. When it feels like it releases, when it doesn't, that's it. When it wants to kill a little bit of people, I don't care whether it has said that Hamas is, that have maybe cited a site where Hamas is, Hamas agents, however much they call them terrorists, that's subjective to so many people. They come and they kill them and everything. If you are a child or a mother or a father, your child has been killed, or your mother has been killed, or your dad has been killed, what's the most appropriate way to respond to that?
So are you supporting the 7th of October?
I'm not supporting the 7th October, but I'm saying when you subject people to such atrocious treatment, they react. And their reaction may not be to our favorites or what we may think should be the reaction of any human being.
So that's your conclusion on the 7th of October.
Exactly, because we don't know how deep the suffering is. And if it continues like that, then it's Israel that is creating the Hamas, because it's not going to stop. The children are going to say, you killed my father, I have to revenge. You killed my mother, I'm going to revenge. For 40 years, they will pass it on to their children. So basically, this ruling and the document that I read yesterday saying that Israel and, of course, Hamas had already agreed to sit on the table with Israel. Israel agreed on having a ceasefire. I think it's a fundamental ruling in case of humanitarian, of humanity. Mm-hmm. And for the case of Uganda, I think as people of Uganda, we ought to have an individual responsibility, but also there are agencies that are put in place to work for people. Despite people having their individual responsibility in partaking all the action that they have to take, these agencies have to work or have to do what they ought to be doing.
Thank you, Moses. Julian, closing remarks on the issue.
Well, my closing remarks, as we look back on the 38 years, as a nation, we still have so many years ahead of us. So I think before we look at our leaders or what the government is doing for us, let's ask ourselves, if you're working in a government parastatal, if you're working in an office somewhere, if you're working in Ministry of Lands, if you're working in URA, if you're working in Uganda National Bureau of Standards, what are you doing as an individual to make our country better? Such that 10 years from now, you know that you also did a contribution that made the country better. Because we cannot keep blaming everybody. Yes, we can blame the president, we can blame the ministers, we can blame the system, but it starts with us. So I call on the young people and I call on everybody that whatever you're doing, strive to make sure that the next 30 years, we are proud of those years. You know that you're working in URA, you're not being corrupt, such that at the end of the day, you cripple the whole system. When you become corrupt, you're the same person creating potholes because you're not enabling the repairing of the potholes. If you work in Ministry of, let's say, Lands, you're complicating the system of people being able to acquire land in an official and clear way. That means you're more corrupt than the so-called, then how will you blame the president for that? So I'm asking that wherever you are, whether you're running a business, ensure you pay your taxes. Then we shall be able to repair the roads. If you're running, managing a certain entity, where you're supposed to serve people. Do the right job. Don't just pour money out of people. When you're given a contract to construct a road, do what you're supposed to do, such that this road, we don't have to repair it in the next 1 year, such that we don't have to borrow again. That's why when you look at the debt that we have in this country, it's so scary. It's because as Ugandans, we don't take particular interest in some of these things. But it is so scaring that you ask yourself, why is it that, how are our children going to survive in this country? When you look at the whole corrupt system, there is no set system that is allowing schools to be able to pay school fees that as a set standard. Every school wakes up one morning, thinks that we can pay 5 million and it's okay. Nobody's going to ask. So we are denying so many intelligent children good education. The so-called government schools where all the intelligent children used to be. The entire schools, the Nyakasura schools. Now, the more intelligent children are denied to be in those schools because they can't afford to pay school fees. So indirectly, I think we are the ones as Ugandans who have failed the state. We are the ones who have failed the system. We are the ones who have, we should actually account. We should look inwards and ask, in the 38, I should look at my age now. If I'm 40 years or something, I should ask myself, in the 38 years, what have I done for my country? And then that's the basis I should stand to judge either the president or to judge government, because government is me. Government is my contribution to this state. So when I do my part, you do your part, you do your part, you do your part, that's government. We do not expect any government from somewhere else. Government is us, government is we, government is me. So when I do my part, if everybody pays their tax on time, and these taxes are utilized very well, that means we shall not have issues with roads. We shall not have issues with hospitals. We shall not have issues with schools. We shall not have issues with all energy. Everybody is able to access energy. So what I'm saying is,
as you finish, Julian,
as I conclude, is that let everybody take responsibility for the next. We've already skipped to the 38 years. Those are done. Now let's look at the next 30 years.
But aren't individuals supposed to ask for accountability if they are paid for taxes and organizations are not implementing the rules? Isn't the rule of law supposed to be?
And that is where I come in, I say yes. Of course, that is why I'm saying every one of us has to take part. Because when you pay taxes, then I expect someone working in URA to manage these taxes properly. Then I expect that this money from URA, when it goes to KCCA to construct a road, then the road should be a chain of services. And on every stage, everybody should be able to do their job and responsibility in a responsibility, in a responsible, patriotic way, working for my country, not working for my stomach.
Thank you, Julian, Moses, and Roy, for your able participation on this program. To our audience, we appreciate your company from the beginning up to the conclusion of this show. This is the Focus on Parliament show on Civic Space TV. Much appreciation to our production unit for keeping us on air. You can engage with us on our various social media platforms. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are on Facebook, on X, and also on Instagram. See you next time.